By my mid-30s, I thought I had already done the inner work, but I soon realized there were deeper layers of conditioning within me that still needed healing. I'm Anamika, and in my last video, I talked about feeling behind in my early 30s and how I learned to let go of societal timelines and trust my own path. If you haven't checked out that video yet, I'll link it here. Today, I want to talk about what came after that, an even bigger period of growth and healing, this time being around my identity, people pleasing, cultural expectations, and how I found my way back to my true self. So when I turned 35, I felt like I had reached a really good point in my life. I had done the self-development work, I'd let go of limiting beliefs, and I was building a life that finally felt aligned. I had even discovered my purpose, which was to help others align with their authentic selves and create more fulfilling lives. What I didn't know was that there would be another phase of even more growth that I'd have to go through first. At 36, I met my husband. I moved to America, we got engaged, and I became part of a new family dynamic. Going in, I had thought, this is an Indian family who have been living in the West for 40 odd years, just like my family have, so surely the dynamics will be pretty similar. However, I soon learned that the expectations around traditions were a lot more conservative than the ones that I had been raised with. Growing up, I was connected to my Indian roots through family, food, language, and attending different religious and cultural events. But I was also someone that was born and raised in New Zealand. So naturally, both worlds shaped my identity, my mindset, and the way that I saw and experienced life. That's why stepping into an environment where traditions seemed to matter more than personal identity, it became quite hard for me to understand and process. And what made it harder was seeing how these traditional roles and expectations didn't seem to really fall on the sons and the daughters in the family, but just on the daughters-in-law. We were the ones expected to adapt, conform, and uphold these traditions. In many parts of Indian culture, when a woman gets married, there's this belief that who she was before marriage is no longer important. Her background and experiences, her achievements, and her identity become secondary to her role of being a daughter-in-law. Sadly, even in 2026, this belief exists in most parts of India, and as I experienced, even within some families who've been living in the West for a long time. So early on, whenever we spent time with the family, which back then was almost every weekend, these expectations constantly came up in conversations, whether they were being said directly or indirectly. It often felt like who I truly was didn't really matter. And whenever my husband and I would try to question these traditions, the response was always, that's just how it is. Over time, there were moments where it felt like progress was being made, like some of what we were saying was finally being heard and certain expectations were being let go of. But just when we'd feel a sense of relief, other expectations would still be there. And you might be wondering, why didn't you just stand your ground more? Trust me, we wanted to, but most of the time, staying quiet felt easier than creating conflict or disappointing people. If you've grown up in an Indian or South Asian household, you'll know what I mean. We're raised to respect and not question our elders. We're taught to not cause conflict, to just let things go and stay quiet so we don't upset anyone. And so many of us, especially women, become people pleasers because of this. We learn early on that keeping everyone else comfortable is more important than our own feelings and needs. On top of all of this, for me, I was in a different country. I didn't have my own family and friends nearby, and all the people that I was now around only knew me as, well, being my husband's wife and the new daughter-in-law in the family. There seemed to be little interest in getting to know me for who I really was, and so my identity became wrapped up in being a daughter-in-law and constantly thinking about what was being expected of me. The version of me that had travelled, built a business, done the self-development work, that version of me suddenly felt very far away. Before moving here, I would journal and meditate, and I had a pretty good self-care and wellness routine overall. But because I was so mentally consumed by the new environment that I was now in, I stopped doing those spiritual and self-care practices. So all of these things affected my mental health, my emotional well-being, and my sense of self. I knew I couldn't keep going on like this and something had to change. So eventually, through therapy and more inner work, I began to understand what was really going on. A lot of this wasn't just about the new family dynamic, it was about generational patterns. The people pleasing, not feeling like we could just stand our ground, and the belief that keeping the peace was more important. But then we made a decision that these patterns need to end with us. Because what I learned was staying silent doesn't create peace, it creates resentment towards others and towards yourself. When we don't speak up and set boundaries, people get used to the version of us that's always available, agreeable, and willing to adjust for everyone else. Learning to set boundaries was definitely a struggle, but eventually my husband and I started having more open and honest conversations with family, and while it's taken a long time, I've noticed that slowly we're being heard and understood more. For previous generations, questioning any of these traditions wasn't an option. So I'm glad our generation is finally able to bring awareness to them, start these conversations, and break these cycles. We still have a long way to go with family and with the wider Indian and South Asian community, but the fact that these conversations are now happening is a great start. And I believe that when our generation begins letting go of these outdated norms, we're not just healing ourselves, but we're healing for the generations who came before us and creating something healthier for the generations that come after us too. These past few years haven't been easy, but looking back, I know that this was exactly the growth and healing I was meant to go through. And what's come out of this has been breaking generational patterns, letting go of people pleasing, feeling more empowered, and finally starting to be seen and understood for who I truly am. For the first time in a long time, I feel like myself again. If any part of this video resonated with you, whether it's navigating cultural expectations, family dynamics, people pleasing, or identity struggles, I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments. My hope for this channel is to be a safe space for honest conversations and a place where you feel seen, understood, and less alone in your experiences. Thank you so much for watching. Take care, and I'll see you in the next one.